right, we're here to check out this really cool Starfall Mystery Saber number 180. So let's hop down to the table. Let's talk about what went in with the install and the electronics. Let's show off a few of the features and commands. We'll hop back out, and then I'll go over some more features and commands with the blade in, and then we'll wrap it up. Thanks for checking it out. All right, so let's talk about Mystery Saber 180 from Starfall Sabers. This came to me with, empty, and the idea was to have a press fit chassis, and Nick had this box created with 2 switches. The customer decided to go with a CosmicIntergalactic switch, so that is our main button up top, so it's got a Neopixel underneath. I don't know if you can hear that, but a little bit of a clicky sound. And then for our aux, we have a brass Kalymian Custom Sabers. And then we do have a blade plug. And so on the back side here, that's our blade retention. Here's our provided Allen key. So let's just back this off real quick. So I did print a little bit of an extension here so that you could just drop this in without thinking about it. And it will go in and touch the bottom of that PCB emitter holder. So we've got a Shtok V3 Neopixel for our main. This will just mimic what the blade's going to do. It's not doing anything special. But, if maintenance ever needs to occur, Nick mentioned this in his breakdown video, but these screws undo, and there's a hidden set screw for the PCB holder under there. So yeah. And then this is also our grip retention key. So Nick did 2 set screws here so we could get alignment of the grip section with all of the knurling. And then you'll notice on the extension piece that comes out that holds the chassis, there's also 2 little beveled indentations. So you'll feel these screws grip down when you've got it. But do make sure you back these off enough so that when you pull the grip off, you're not scratching anything, but also be mindful not to back them off too far so that you lose it. So I'm going to set the grip aside here. And here's our chassis. We've got a Resin Greeblie Chassis with a bunch of design details. And this is based off of a set I did previously for a run of Mystery Sabers, but we've got like a silver rub and buff and then some heat staining pigments on this vent. We've got a bunch of chassis strips. So we've got a 2020 Neopixel accent strip running under here, subdivided into 3 separate blades. We've got 2 short Edison filaments under these grill sections in red. And then we've got 2 2020 Neopixels under these. So this port Greeblie has its own animation, and this baffled Greeblie has its own animation. But we also have a 28mm KR bass speaker, Proffie V3, high amp kill switch. We are providing an 18650 battery. And what I like to do is just it'll just pop out right there. And then we can see our positive terminal clearly indicated in paint, but also spring side's always your negative. And you can see the Starfall logo embossed in the battery tray. So we'll just put our battery back in. Flat side goes to the negative, nipple goes to the nipple. Do be mindful to kind of grip the chassis when you do that so you're not yanking out. This is a press fit into this section. Same kind of goes for the Proffie. It's a press fit. And then there's plenty of space here to get a 90-degree cable if you want to do any config reprogramming. Keep getting out of focus here. But if you need to, you can also lift the Proffie, angle it up, or pull your SD card out. Do be mindful of the cables going, or the wires going there so you don't mess anything up. But when we're ready, we'll hit our kill switch, and then we should get a boot sound here. So now you can see the subdivided blades here and the various animations happening. And it'll be different for each preset and a preset. And so we can also see the CIG Neopixel switch here. Each preset will kind of have a different on and off state for each of these Greeblies, different color sets to sort of match with the theme of the actual sound font. And this is, sorry, I keep wobbling this. This is designed with the Starfall sound font collection. So that's 8 Sound fonts. There's some additional sound fonts on the SD card, and I did program a few of the default Proffie fonts toward the end so that you do have some extra flair so that you can see what the Saber can do. But generally speaking, you know, you've got the Starfall package, and so the colors will be sort of canon colors for each of the sound fonts. And then towards the end, the very last preset is a battery level indicator. So the onboard chassis LEDs will go to a green if it's a good charge, depleted down to a red. So it'll go from green to like yellow to red on the chassis. And then same goes for the switch. When the blade is in on the battery level preset, there will be a little bubble indicator towards the blade tip. It'll be fully charged. And as it depletes and it gets closer to the hilt, the less the charge is. You can do an on-demand battery if you want by holding, in the off state, holding aux and tapping power.
Battery level 100%.
And then, so I did the Brian Connor voice pack for Proffie OS 7. This is running OS 7.13. So that being said, any preset, you can get your battery level if you want to, but the very last preset is a battery level indicator. And we can get that by pointing the hilt down, hitting aux.
Battery level.
So you can see we've got 100% charge based on what Hu Yang just said. And then each of these Neopixels is green. So that's our positive charge. To go forward in presets, we just hit aux. And then to go backwards, you saw me point it down. So the Edison filaments will sort of blink or pulse or do something like that. And then when the Saber's on, they'll sort of vibrate and they'll respond to blaster blocks and such. So yeah. Just show off a few more chassis details.
Celestial.
So here we go. And then I'll show you when we got our emitter lighting like it should. All right. So when we're ready to actually wield the Saber, we can put the grip back on. And again, you've got these two little indentations to let you know where exactly the screws line up, the set screws. So then we just put that in, cinch one down, cinch the other down. Nice and tight, okay? And then we have gesture on, twist on, I should say. Twist off. Or if we just want to go in regular mode, we can hit power. All right. So that's pretty much it for this part. We'll go over some other button features with the battery, or I'm sorry, with the blade in. This is this fits a 7/8 inch diameter blade, and it is programmed for a 32-inch blade length. But when we're ready, we can turn this off. If you leave this like on a stand for display purposes, I think I have the timer set for, it's either 5 or 10. I'm programming this with some other Sabers, so I can't remember what I did, but I believe it's 10 minutes. So if you don't press anything after 10 minutes, all of the chassis lights will go off, and then you'll need to hit a button press to wake it back up. It's not a deep sleep, so there will be a slight depletion in charge, but for the most part, it'll save you some battery life. That's what our kill switch is for. And yeah, so the config is on the SD card, and there are, I think, 9 blade styles. So we've got 3 here, 1 for the Edison filament, 2 here, 1 for the switch, and then the main blade. But it is always in the order of blade first, then it's the switch, and then it's the chassis strips. And I believe the Edison filaments last. So if you need to get into color change mode for like, if you want to just edit the one blade color, you can get into edit mode. I'm not going to cover that here. I do have a printout for things I'm not going to cover that I will provide with the Saber, and you are inclined to read that first. There's also a web link at the very last page. Visit the web link. This is running the FET263 prop file. So it's got all of his feature sets and controls, and he has a plethora of videos if you want to learn more about how to wield the Saber, or if you decide to get into programming Proffie. So yeah, let's wrap this portion up, and then we'll go over the next portion with the blade end. All right, so we talked about the chassis and the components and the programming, showed off some of those really cool accent styles and all the various things that they can do in the on and off state. So the only thing that shows up on the exterior when the Saber is kind of off is the CIG Neopixel switch. So I've programmed it to be dim because this acts like a magnifying glass and it can be very bright. So it's at about 30% power, 35% power, so it's not blowing you out. But depending on which preset you are, you'll see a different color or a different animation. So I'm going to go back to Hero and just discuss some.
Hero's Journey.
This is sporting OS 713, and I've included the Huyang voice pack from Brian Connor for all of the edit mode functions. So unless you're actually getting into edit mode, the only time you'll ever hear it is if you check the battery level, which you can do in the off state by holding aux and tapping power.
Battery level 98%.
So this is programmed for a 32-inch blade length. This is a 7/8 blade. This is my KR Pixel stick. And so if we go backwards in the presets, we'll get to the very last preset, which is battery level indicator. We're on like the third or fourth one.
Battery level.
And battery level is the last. So we've got a green bubble, and it's almost all the way at the tip. So that's how we know we've got a very full charge. As this depletes, this bubble will come down. And when we are on this preset, and I did show this down below, the chassis strips will show a green to a red, as will the CIG Neopixel switch for the main switch. So if nothing is in it and it's all buttoned up, but it is on and on the shelf maybe, and you've kind of left this on, then you can sort of kind of check that either with the on-demand button press or with that. So let's go back to Hero. Let's show off some other functions with this. So
Hero's Journey.
Now, normally I like to demonstrate a lot of this stuff with Hero's Journey because it only has those force effect sounds. And so some of the Starfall presets or sound fonts have a mix of quotes and sound effects. So it just depends on which one you're on. But I know the first few definitely have quotes and they can go on rather long. So when I'm demonstrating how to do that, I don't want to kind of waste time. So that being said, we have a multiple number of ways to engage the Saber on. Our Neopixel switch is our power. We can press power, and then we'll get into regular mode, right? So all that really means is that when we clash the Saber, we're just going to get glancing blows showing up. And if we want to engage a lockup, and lockups could be middle of the blade or blade tips, whether you're doing a melt like I demonstrated at the beginning, or if you're doing a drag and pointing down, then you would need to hold either power or aux as you clashed. So again, I don't know if that is igniting up against the, with the ambient lighting going on in here. But if we want to engage a lockup, then we hold one of those two switches. You can hear we're in a lockup until we let go, right? And again, that's also true of melt or drag effects. But, so that's just pressing power. But if we do our gesture on, then we'll get into battle mode. So we have two gestures, twist on and thrust on. I'll just demonstrate twist on for the sake of this demo. Now we're in battle mode, and if we clash the Saber, we're in a lockup until we pull away from that position. You can move the Saber around a little bit, but if you pull away like a jerk, like a jerking motion, then that's when the gyroscope knows to end the lockup. So to move it around as if we were dueling, right? We're pressing up against somebody else's Saber. But if we hop out, then we're disengaging. And that's true of melt as well. So if we're sideways, we'll get a melt, right? And I demonstrated this at the beginning. You can twist to change the colors slightly. And then the longer you hold it on this particular blade style, the more animated it gets until you pull away. Or if you're pointing down, you'll get that drag, right? So again, you can move around, but the moment you pull away. Okay. So that's gesture control, battle mode, and how to turn it on and off. To move forward in the presets, we hit aux. And then to move backwards, we point the hilt down and press aux. So now we're on Ruin. Now with that on command, Ruin is the only one of the Starfall sound fonts that has a pre-on, and that will only happen if you just engage regular mode with the button press. If you do a gesture control, you bypass the pre-on. So let's show that real quick. And it's real short. It's just a little bit of an emitter flare, and it's just like a split second long, and then you hear the Saber light up. There we go. So now we're on in regular mode, and then we can twist off if that's what we're going to do. But if we twist on, we just get the ignition. Okay. So to do force effect commands, when the Saber's on, we're going to hold the power button for a second and let go. If we're in the off state, holding for a second and letting go will start the track player mode if we're horizontal, or it will play the designated track if we're pointed upright. We can also start and stop the track with the blade on if we're pointed upright. So let's demonstrate that real quick. So in the off state, pointing up, I'm going to hit the designated track. Now, when I say designated track, I've selected a soundtrack for each preset that I've programmed, but I've also loaded the SD card up with a bunch of soundtracks in the common folder where the Hu Yang voice pack is. So if we do the track player mode, you'll get a little chime, and then you can play any of the tracks that I programmed. But let's just do the designated track real quick. Okay. And we could be on and still playing, right? But if we hold the Saber horizontal, we get a force effect. And on this one, it kind of does this yellowish thing. Now that force effect animation for each preset only happens for as long as there's a sound effect. But if we want to turn the soundtrack off, we have to be upright while the Saber's on. Now I accidentally hit it twice there, so it turned the track off and turned the blade off. But again, we can turn it on and off with just a single, for a second. Hold it for a second. Now, if we're horizontal in the off state, we're going to get into that track player mode I mentioned. So if we hold it, all right. So if we rotate, we're going to go, if we rotate right, we're going to go forward. If we rotate back, we're going to go backwards. And it's alphabetically. It probably also will be a lag because I've loaded it up and it's in a subfolder, right? So, but I'm rotating sideways. If we want to continue to play the one track that it's on, we have a number of ways of doing that. I'll let you read how to do it, but I just generally press the power button, right? You'll hear that little click. Now if I move the Saber around, it's still gonna play the soundtrack until I hold it for a second to turn it off. So that's track player mode. And you heard kind of a little bit of a metal band thing there. I've actually provided some Easter eggs here so that you can check that out when you go through it. But tons of tracks. So there will be a little bit of a lag as it's reading that subfolder and you're scrolling through all those soundtracks and it's loading it up. But again, if you just want to do the designated track, point upright. When the Saber's on, you can only turn on and off the designated track. So let's go backwards real quick.
Select preset.
Oops, I held that too long.
Hero's Journey.
Okay, so I wanted to show Hero's Journey off one more time to demonstrate the force effect, since we were showing off quite a bit with that unstable blade style for Ruin. So when the Saber's on, again, if we're in any position other than upright or all the way down, then we're going to do a force effect when we hold power for a second or two. And you can see what I've done for most of the blade styles other than Ruin is it goes unstable, right? So you've kind of got just this audio flicker, if you can sort of see it reacting against my shirt or against my arm. But then if we hold it for a second, you get that sound effect, but you can also see the unstable blade style for as long as the sound effect is playing. So that being said, we can move on to some other presets real quick. Again, all of those functions, the soundtrack, the track player, the force effect, and truth be told, the quote player, which I didn't demonstrate because these aren't, the Starfall sound fonts aren't separated by force or quote. But if you add aftermarket sound fonts, you can get quote player mode by pointing the hilt down when the Saber is on and doing that same button press, holding power for a second. And it'll switch between force player mode and quote player mode if everything in the soundtrack folder is set up appropriately. I don't have any of that done here on this Saber, so it's a moot point, but just something to know in the future if you add sound fonts. You have to not only name the files appropriately, put them in the appropriate subfolder, and then switch between it with that button command. So I did talk about battery level, which we've heard Hu Yang. The opposite will be in the off state, our volume menu level. So if we hold power and tap aux, we'll be in the volume level.
Enter volume menu.
So now if we rotate to the right,
maximum volume.
We'll go to the maximum. If we rotate to the left, we'll go down in increments of about 10%. And you'll hear clicks. So we get all the way down.
Minimum volume.
I don't know if you heard that, but he said minimum volume.
Maximum volume.
That's why I generally keep it 1 or 2 off of maximum.
Volume menu end.
I've set this for about 2250 as the maximum volume. These 3-watt 4 ohm speakers from KR can actually go hotter than that, but I generally just try to find a balance. So in the future, if you decide to learn how to program Proffie, you can actually bump that up some more. There's a good resonance chamber here. It's plenty loud as it is, so you don't have to mess with it, but the option is there. I generally never push it above 2500, but theoretically you can go as high as like 3000. So the only other thing I want to demonstrate real quick is color change on the Cornhorn sound font. Okay, so now we're on the Cornhorn. What I decided to do on the switch is treat it like it's a speeder bike, so it goes from like a red to a green in the off state, just a blinking. But color change is the same as the battery level when the Saber is on, though. So we'll hold aux and tap power. But for the Cornhorn, instead of getting into the color wheel where you can select which color you want, it's going to switch between white and a light purple color. And again, that's based on some lore behind this sound font that Nick asked us to program. So when we start off, we're just in our silver color, which is a whitish color. And then if we hold aux and tap power, it wipes to purple. So hopefully you can see that in the ambient lighting against me or the room. But it goes to white and purple. Any other sound font, you'll get into color change mode. But with OS 7 and all of the features I've packed into that chassis, I generally discourage that because you will end up, if you're doing color change wheel, you're going to change all of the accent pixels on the fly to match whatever the blade is. If that's something you want to do, that's fine. If you like how I've programmed everything, then what I would suggest is use edit mode to change the blade style. Again, you can read how to do that. In the off, you do a button command, and then you'll hop into the menu system, select the blade. Now, I've made it convenient in that it's the main blade is the first blade, so it's always blade 1. You pick blade 1, change color or select color, and then hop into it, and then it'll go through the color wheel. So again, you can read how to do that. I'm not going to demonstrate, but if we try to do it on the fly, but just so I can demonstrate it on the fly, if you do it, I'll show you what it does. So we hold aux and tap power. You get a little mode, and then Hu Yang will actually tell you the colors. So it's just going to select between a number of colors.
Red.
So he's going to announce it for you.
Orange, red.
But what you can tell,
red, white.
So you can see it's changing it here, and you can also know that it's changing it
Navajo white.
elsewhere.
Lemon shofar.
But if you like that color, to accept it, and again, it's gonna wipe everything, you press power. If you accidentally get into this mode, you can just
Navajo white.
hit aux, and he'll say revert,
Revert.
and you'll get out of that, and you won't make any changes. You can also, in the edit mode, revert color changes. If you do change something and you wanna go back, it will know based on what the config has been programmed to, what I've set it to, it can revert back to that. So again, I'm not gonna go over edit mode here. You've got a printout that goes over all of those features. So that'll pretty much cover it. If you have any questions to the customer, please feel free to email me upon receiving this video or receiving the HELT. Again, there's a backup of the config on the SD card. I highly suggest you take the SD card out as soon as you get the HELT, put it in your computer, save it to a file, like everything that's on there, even all the sound fonts and everything. And then that way, if something happens to the electronics or something goes on and you programmed it and it just does things you're not expecting, you can always erase the SD, put all that stuff back on, and then it'll sort of go back from scratch. So again, I appreciate your patience and I hope you enjoy it.